I'm back. So a quick recap of what I read yesterday. Einstein is getting sick, and oh my gosh, like I forgot. Einstein was getting sick, and Garrison is getting tracked by that. Is getting followed by the NSA people. They're onto him. Yeah, that was a little bit of what I read yesterday, and yeah, it's starting to get pretty serious. All right, so let's continue. Had been exceedingly cautious even before he had known he was being watched Saturday. Garrison Dilworth had shipped the paintings to their new house. Now, unpacking and unwrapping the canvases, creating piles of paper padding in the living room, Nora was transported. Travis knew that. For many years, this work was what she had lived for, and he could see that having the paintings with her again was not only a great joy to her, but would probably spur her to return to her new canvases in a spare bedroom with greater enthusiasm. Oh yeah, also Nora is a mother to be. You want to call Garrison and thank him? He asked. Yes, absolutely, she said. But first, let's unpack them all and make sure none of them is damaged. Posted about around the harbor, posing as yacht owners and fishermen. Cliff Soames and the other NSA agents watched Dilworth and Delacobe and eavesdropped on them electronically as the day waned. Twilight descended without any indication that Dilworth intended to put to sea. Soon, night fell, yet the attorney and his woman made no move. Half an hour after dark, Cliff Soames got wary of pretending to fish off the stern of a Kiowa Lee 66-foot sport yacht docked 4 slips away from Dilworth's. He climbed the steps, went into the pilot's cabin, and pulled the headphones off Hank Gorner, the agent who was monitoring the old couple's conversation through a directional mic. He listened for himself. The time in Acapulco when Jack hired the fishing boat. Yes, the whole crew looked like pirates. We thought we'd have our throats cut, be dumped at sea, but then it turned out they were all divinity students studying to be missionaries. And Jack said, "Return the headphones." Clips and Jack said, "Return the headphones." Clip said, "Still reminiscing." The other agent nodded. The cabin light was out, and Hank was illuminated only by a small hooded built-in work lamp above the chart table, so his features looked elongated and strange. That's the way it's been all day. At least they have some great stories. I'm going to the John, Cliff said wearily. Be right back. Take 10 hours if you want. They're not going anywhere. A few minutes later, when Cliff returned, Hank Gorner pulled off his headphones and said, "They went below decks. They went below decks. Something up? Nah, what we hope. They're gonna jump each other's bones." Oh, Cliff. Jeez. I don't want to listen to this. Listen, Cliff. Listen, Cliff insisted. Hank pulled one earphone to his head. Jeez, they're undressing each other, and they're as old as my grandparents. This is embarrassing. Cliff sighed. Now they're quiet, Hank said, a frown of disdain creeping over his face. Any second, they're gonna start moaning, Cliff. Listen, Cliff insisted. He snatched the light jacket off the table and went outside again so he wouldn't have to listen. He took up his position in a chair on the stern deck, lifting the fishing pole once more. The night was cool enough for the jacket, but otherwise it could not have been better. The air was clear and sweet, scented with just a slight tingle of the sea. The moonless sky was full of stars. The water slapped lullingly against the dock pilings and against the hulls of the mirrored boats. Somewhere across the harbor, on another craft, someone was playing love songs from the 40s. An engine turned over, whomp, 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 and there was something romantic about the sound. On a long trip through the South Pacific toward palm-shaded islands, silently that idling engine roared, and Cliff realized it was the Amazing Grace. As he rose from his chair, dropping the fishing pole, he saw Dilworth's boat reversing out of its slip recklessly fast. It was a sailboat, and subconsciously Cliff had not expected it to move with sails furled, but it had auxiliary 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 engines. They knew this, were prepared for this, but still it startled him. He hurried back to the cabin. Hank, get harbor patrol. Dilworth's on the move, but they're in the sack. Like hell they are. Cliff ran out to the bow deck and saw that Dilworth had already swung the Amazing Grace around and was headed toward the mouth of the harbor. No lights at the aft end of the boat, the area around the wheel, just one small light forward. Jesus, he was really making a break for it. By the time they unpacked all 100 canvases, hung a few, and carried the rest into the unused bedroom, they were starving. Garrison's probably having dinner now too, Nora said. I don't want to interrupt him. Let's call him after we've eaten. In the pantry, Einstein released letters from the lucite tubes and spelled out a message. It's dark. Close the shutters first. Surprised and unsettled by his own, uncharacteristic inattention to security, Travis hurried from room to room, closing the interior shutters and slipping the bow-type latches in place. Fascinated by Nora's paintings and delighted by the pleasure she exhibited in their arrival, he had not even noticed that night had arrived. Halfway toward the mouth of the harbor, confident that distance and the engine's roar now protected them from electronic eavesdroppers, Garrison said, "Take me close to the outer point of the north breakwater along the channel's edge." "Are you sure about this?" Della asked worriedly. "You're not a teenager." He patted her bottom and said, "I'm better." Dreamer. He kissed her on the cheek and edged forward along the starboard railing, where he got into position for his jump. He was wearing dark blue swim trunks. He should have had a wetsuit because the water would be chilly, but he thought he ought to be able to swim to the breakwater around the point of it and haul himself out on the north side, out of sight of the harbor, all in a few minutes, long before the water temperature reached too much body heat from him. "Company," Della called from the wheel. He looked back and saw a harbor patrol boat leaving the docks to the south, coming toward them on their port side. "They won't stop us," he thought. "They have no legal right," but he had to go over the side before the patrol swung in and took up a position astern. From behind, they would see him vault the railing. As long as they were able to port, the Amazing Grace would conceal his departure, and the boat's phosphorescent wake would cover the first few seconds of his swim around the point of the breakwater, long enough for the patrol's attention to have moved on with Della. They were heading out at the high speed with which Della felt comfortable. The Hinkley Sue Wester jolted through the slightly choppy waters with enough force to make it necessary for Garrison to hold fast to the railing. Still, they seemed to move past the stone wall of the breakwater at a frustratingly slow pace, and the harbor patrol drew nearer. But Garrison waited because he didn't want to go into the harbor 100 yards short of its end. If he went in too soon, he would not be able to swim all the way out to the point and around it. Instead, he would have to swim straight to the breakwater and climb its flank within full sight of all observers. Now the patrol close to within 100 yards. He could see them when he rose from a crouch and looked across the Hinckley's cabin roof and began to swing around behind them. And Garrison could not wait much longer. Could not. The point, Dilla called from the wheel. He threw himself over the railing, into the dark water, away from the boat. The sea was cold. It shocked the breath out of him. He sank. He could not find the surface, was seized by panic, flailed, trashed, but then broke through the air, gasping. The amazing race was surprisingly close. He felt as if he had been trashing in confusion beneath the surface for a minute or more. But it must have been only a second or two because his boat was not yet far away. The harbor patrol was close too, and he decided that even the churning wake of the Amazing Grace did not give him enough cover. So he took a deep breath and went under again, staying down as long as he could. When he came up, both Della and her shadowers were well past the mouth of the bar of the harbor, turning south, and he was safe from observation. The outgoing tide was swiftly carrying him past the point of the northern breakwater, which was a wall of loose boulders and rocks that rose more than 20 feet above the waterline. Mottled gray and black ramparts in the night. He not only had to swim around the end of that barrier but had to move toward land against the resistant current. Without further delay, he began to swim, wondering why on earth he had thought this would be a snap. You're almost 71, he told himself as he stroked past the rocky point, which was illuminated by a navigation warning light. Whatever position to play hero. But he knew what possessed him, a deep-seated belief that the dog must remain free, that it must not be treated as the government's property. If we've come so far that we can create as God creates, then we have to learn to act with the justice and mercy of God. That was what he told Nora and Travis and Einstein on the night Ted Hockney had been killed, and he had meant every word he said. Salt water stung his eyes, blurred his vision. Some had gone into his mouth, and it burned a small ulcer on his lower lip. He fought the current, pulled past the point of the breakwater, out of sight of the harbor, then slashed toward the rocks. Reaching them at last, he hung onto the first boulder he touched, gasping, not yet quite able to pull himself out of the water. In the intervening weeks since Nora and Travis went on the run, Garrison had plenty of time to think about Einstein, and he felt even more strongly that to imprison an intelligent creature innocent of all crime was an act of grave injustice. Regardless of whether the prisoner was a dog, Garrison had devoted his life to pursuit of justice that was made possible by the laws of a democracy, and to the maintenance of the freedom that grew from this justice. When a man of ideals decides he is too old to risk everything for what he believes in, then he's no longer a man of ideals. He may no longer be a man at all. That hard truth had driven him, in spite of his age, to make this night swim. Funny, the long life of idealism should, after 7 decades, be put to the ultimate test over the fate of a dog. But what a dog, and what One wondrous new world we live in. He thought genetic technology might have to be re- rechristened. Genetic art, for every work of art was an act of creation, and no act of creation was finer or more beautiful than the creation of an intelligent mind. That's crazy. Getting his second wind, he heaved entirely out of the water onto the sloped north flank of the northern breakwater. That barrier rose between him and the harbor, and he moved inland along the rocks while the sea surged at his left side. He brought a waterproof penlight clipped to his trunks, and now he used it to proceed barefoot with the greatest caution, afraid of slipping on the wet stones and breaking a leg or an ankle. He could see the city lights a few hundred yards ahead and the vague silvery line of the beach. He was cold, but not as cold as he had been in the water. His heart was beating fast, but not as fast as before. He was going to make it. Lem Johnson drove down from the temporary HQ in the courthouse, and Cliff met him at the empty boat slip where the Amazing Grace had been tied up. A wind had risen. A hundreds of craft along the docks were swallowing slightly in their berths. They creaked and slacked. Sail lines clicked and clinked against their masts. Dock lamps and neighboring boat lanterns cast shimmering patterns of light on the dark, oily-looking water where Dilworth's 42-footer had been moored. Harbor Patrol? Lem asked worriedly. They followed him out to open sea. Seemed as if he was going to turn north, swung close by the point, but then he went south instead. Did Dilworth see them? He had to, as you see. No fog, lots of stars, clear as a bell. Who's? Oh, Garrison. Good. I want him to be aware. Coast Guard? I've talked to the cutter, Cliff assured him. They're on the spot, flanking the Amazing Grace at 100 yards, heading south along the coast, shivering in the rapidly cooling air. Lem said they know he might try putting ashore in a rubber boat or whatever. They know he might try putting ashore in a rubber boat or whatever. They know, Cliff said. He can't do it under their noses. Is the guard sure he sees them? They're lit up like a Christmas tree. Good. I want him to know it's hopeless. If we can just keep him from warning the Cornells, then they'll call him sooner or later, and we'll have them. Even if they call him from a payphone, we'll know their general location. In addition to taps on Dilworth's home and office phones, the NSA had installed tracing equipment that would lock open a line the moment a connection was made and keep it open even after both parties hung up until the caller's number and street address was ascertained and verified. Even if Dilworth shouted a warning and hung up the instant he recognized one of the Cornell's voices, it would be too late. The only way he could try to foil the NSA was by not answering his phone at all. But even that would do him no good, because after the sixth ring, every incoming call was being automatically answered by the NSA's equipment, which opened the line and began tracing procedures. The only thing could screw us now, Lem said, is if Dilworth gets to a phone we don't have monitored and warns the Cornells not to call him. It's not going to happen, Cliff said. We're on him tight. I wish you wouldn't say that. Lem worried. As the wind got hold of it, a mental clip on a loose line clanged loudly off a spar, and the sound made Lamb jump. My dad always said the worst happens when you least expect it. Cliff shook his head. With all due respect, sir, the more I hear you quote your father, the more I think he must have been just about the gloomiest man who ever lived. Looking around at the wallowing boats and wind chopped water, feeling as if he was moving instead of standing still in a moving world, a little queasy, Lem said, "Yeah, my dad was a great guy in his way, but he was also impossible." Hank Cooner shouted, "Hey!" He was running along the dock from the Kyoe Lee, Cliff, where he and Cliff had been stationed all day. I've just been on with the guard cutter. They're playing their searchlight over the Amazing Grace. Wait, so is Garrison swimming or on his boat? I think he's on his boat because no ways. Swimming. No, he's swimming. He's swimming. Swimming. Intimidating a little, and they tell me they don't see Dilworth, just a woman. Lem said, but Christ is but Christ, she's running the boat. No, Gordon said. There's no lights in the Amazing Grace, but the guard's searchlight brightens up the whole thing, and they say the woman's at the wheel. It's all right. He's just below deck. Cliff said. No, Lem said as his heart started to pound. He wouldn't be below deck at a time like this. He'd be studying the cutter, deciding whether to keep going or turn back. He's now on the Amazing Grace, but he has to be. He didn't get off before she pulled out off the dock. Lem stared out across the crystalline clear harbor toward the light near the end of the northern breakwater. You said the damn boat swung out close to the north point, and he looked as if he was going north, but then he suddenly swung south. Shit, Cliff said. That's where he dropped off, Lem said. Out by the point of the northern breakwater, without a rubber boat, swimming. By God, he's too old for that crap, Cliff protested. Evidently not. He went around the other side and he's headed for a phone and on one of the northern public beaches. We've got to stop him and fast. Cliff cupped his hands to his mouth and shouted the first names of the 4 agents who were positioned on other boats along the docks. His voice carried, echoing flatly off the water. In spite of the wind, men came running even as Cliff's shouts faded away across the harbor. Lem was sprinting for his car in the parking lot. The worst happens when you least expect it. As Travis was rinsing dinner dishes, Laura said, "Look at this." He turned and saw that she was standing by Einstein's food and water dishes. The water was gone, but half his dinner remained. She said, "When have you known him to leave a single scrap?" "Never." Frowning, Travis wiped his hands on the kitchen towel. "The last few days I've thought maybe he's coming down with the cold or something. But he says he feels fine, and today he hasn't been sneezing or coughing like he was." They went to the living room where the retriever was reading Black Beauty with the help of his page-turning machine. They knelt beside him, and he looked up and Nora said, "Are you sick, Einstein?" The retriever barked once, softly. "No. Are you sure?" The quick wag of the tail. "Yes." "You didn't finish your dinner," Travis said. The dog yawned elaborately. Nora said, "Are you telling us you're a little tired?" "Yes." "If you were feeling ill," Travis said, "you let us know right away, wouldn't you?" Face. "Yes." Nora insisted on examining Einstein's eyes, mouth, and ears for obvious signs of infection. But at last she said, "Nothing. He seems okay. I guess even Super Dog has a right to be tired once in a while." The wind had come up fast. It was chilly, and under its lashes the waves rose higher than they had been all day, a massive goose flesh. Garrison reached the landward end of the north flank of the harbor's northern breakwater. He was relieved to depart the hard and sometimes jagged stones of that rampart for the sandy beach. He was sure he had scraped and cut both feet. It felt hot, and his left foot stung with each step, forcing him to limp. He stayed close to the surf, away from the tree-lined park that lay behind the beach. Over there, where park lamps lit the walkways and where spotlights dramatically highlighted the palms, he would be more easily seen from the street. He did not think anyone would be looking for him. He was sure his trick had worked. However, if anyone was looking for him, he did not want to call attention to himself. The gusting wind tore foam off the incoming breakers and flung it in Garrison's face, so he felt as if he was continuously running through spiders' webs. The stuff stung his eyes, which had finally stopped tearing from his dunk in the sea. My prediction is when Garrison reaches some type of payphone or gets a chance to call the Cornells now, they're not gonna pick up. They're not gonna pick up, and that's when he's gonna get caught by the NSA people. At last, he was forced to move away from the surf line, farther up the beach, where the softer sand met the lawn, but where he was still out of the lights. Young people were on the darkish beach, dressed for the chill of the night. Couples on blankets, cuddling, small groups, smoking dope, listening to music. 8 or 10 teenage boys were gathered around two all-terrain vehicles with balloon tires, which were not allowed on the beach during the day and most likely weren't allowed at night. They were drinking beer beside a pit they dug in the sand to bury their bottles if they saw a cop approaching. They were talking loudly about girls and indulging in horseplay. No one gave Garrison more than a glance as he hurried by. In California, health food and exercise fanatics were as common as street muggers in New York, and if an old man wanted to take a cold swim and then run on the beach in the dark, he was no more remarkable or noteworthy than a priest in the church. Damn. As he headed north, Garrison scanned the park to his right in search of payphones. They would probably be in pairs, prominently illuminated on islands of concrete beside one of the walkways or perhaps near one of the public comfort stations. How about just using a random stranger phone and trying to call the Cornells from there? Because on a payphone, you're still going to get tracked. He was beginning to despair, certain that he must have passed at least one group of telephones, that his old eyes were failing him. But then he saw what he was looking for: two payphones with the wing-like sound shields, brightly lighted. They were about 100 feet in from the beach, midway between the sand and the street that flanked the other side of the park. Turning his back to the churning sea, he slowed to catch his breath and walked across the grass under the wind-shaken fronds of a cluster of three stately royal palms. He was still 40 feet from the phones when he saw a car traveling at high speed suddenly brake and pull to the curb with the squeal tires, parking in a direct line from the Koontz. Garrison didn't know who they were, but he decided not to take any chances. He settled into the cover provided by a huge old double-bowled date palm that was, fortunately, not one of those fitted with decorative spotlights. From the notch between the trunks, he had a view of the phones and of the walkway leading out to the curb where the car had parked. Two men got out of the sedan. One sprinted north along the park perimeter, looking inward. searching for something. The other man had rushed straight into the park along the walkway. When he reached the lighted area around the phones, his identity was clear and shocking. Lemuel Johnson, behind the trunks of the Siamese napalm, Garrison drew his arms and legs closer to his body, sure that the jointed bases of the trees provided him with plenty of cover, but trying to make himself smaller nevertheless. Johnson went to the first phone, lifted the handset, and tried to tear it out of the coin box. It had one of those flexible metal cords, and he yanked on it hard, repeatedly, with little effect. Finally, cursing the instrument's toughness, he ripped the headset loose and threw it across the park. Then he shot a second phone. For a moment, as Johnson turned away from the phones and walked straight toward Garrison, the attorney thought he had been seen, but Johnston stopped after only a few stops and scanned the seaward end of the park and the beach beyond. His gaze did not appear to rest even momentarily on the day palms behind which Garrison hid. You damn crazy old bastard, Johnson said, then hurried back toward his car. Crouched in shadows behind the palms, Garrison grinned because he knew whom the NSA man was talking about. Suddenly, the attorney did not mind the chill wind sweeping off the night sea behind him. Damn crazy old bastard or geriatric James Bond, take your pick. Either way, he was still a man to be reckoned with. That's actually funny. I'm getting closer toward the end of the book, but that was fun. That was a good read. But quick recap for what I read. Hey, Garrison is the new James Bond. Garrison went on a little adventure trying to get away from the NSA agents and the NSA people, and the mission was successful. Also, Einstein is getting ill. As the days go on, but he doesn't want to admit it because obviously he doesn't want the Cornells to worry. So he just plays it off because he's not finishing his food, he's not, but he's only drinking water. So yeah, something might be going wrong. But yeah, that was a quick recap of what I read.